Dave, UK rapper, successful start to the man's career. He's pretty young, but he's already had #1 singles. He's had huge recognition from award shows, winning a Mercury Prize of all things, and also Brits. I think he won some Brits or was nominated for some Brits. He might have won. He may have won, actually. I can't remember. My memory does not serve me well with that. But when it comes to things like the Brits and stuff, I don't really take that much interest, pay all that much attention. Sometimes they're just a bit and that was kind of how I actually felt about Psychodrama by Dave. As much as it got all the accolades and all the attention and all the love, I just didn't really get into it. I thought it had some really insightful moments lyrically, and there were some important topics being discussed on there without a doubt. And Dave, has a good way of approaching topics in like a conversational manner, in a way like, we're going to sit down and we're going to discuss this because it's important and we need to discuss it. But the thing with Psychodrama was that his delivery most of the time was very underwhelming. I'm all for like spoken word type hip hop. I'm a big fan of K-Tempest, but I think his approach was just a bit lackluster on Psychodrama, to be honest. The man just needed a bit more oomph to his vocals most of the time. That was the biggest issue for me, and it just washed over me so much because when I'm not interested in a vocalist, I don't really get that invested in much of what they're saying or much of what the song is attempting to do. Sure, there were some good moments, like I say, but yeah, it just didn't land with me. I will say that We're All Alone in This Together doesn't suffer from that as much this time around, although the similar issues do crop up. And in fact, it's frustrating because there are some really great moments lyrically, and the topics that he's tackling are really interesting and insightful, but then there's just a handful of songs that go in the opposite direction, where it kind of hits like Psychodrama again, where there's just so little that I'm invested in because he's just talking so much and saying not that much at all. The best example of that is Verdansk, where I appreciate his efforts in telling you to salt and pepper that beef. Always important, guys, always important. But everything else is just like nothing. He just doesn't really say anything on this track, and it's just so bland. And again, his delivery doesn't really ignite anything. He's just saying a bunch of whatever. It just all kind of strings together in a kind of like Drake sort of way, where Drake just kind of just says everything in one song, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on, and there's just no breaks, there's no excitement, there's no interesting hook, and it just reminded me too much of those Drake-isms. Heart Attack is similar, but not as bad in terms of the lyrics. There are again some important, points being raised, but it goes on for 9 minutes. And I just feel it needs to be more direct. There's a lot of waffling here, and because of his voice that is so casual and laid back quite a lot of the time, for 9 minutes, I can't cope with Dave waffling and saying random things. I don't know really what there is to take interest in here. What works well though is tracks like We're All Alone, where again he's touching on interesting topics about mental health, but then there's a nice beat that comes through and he starts to ride it really well. And I think these are the moments actually where it shows that he can pair the two worlds together. He can ride a good beat with a nice little flow and also say some interesting things. I think more tracks really should attempt this rather than really slow moving Heart Attack 9 minute tracks. Or a song like Three Rivers, where the perspective is very on point, the lyrics are more focused, he's sticking to pretty much one topic from start to finish, he's really tackling it in quite an interesting way too, and it just makes for one of the better tracks because it shows that he can bring out that side of him that has those interesting insights to things, while also keeping it a bit more to the point and not dragging it out for bloody 10 minutes. Rely on migration more than ever before, key workers but they couldn't even get through the door. That's a really interesting line, I think. And then the voice note towards the end where the guy is talking about how he's lived in the UK for God knows how many years. He gets a letter, he's being deported basically, even though he's paid taxes, he's a working man, he's kind of done everything right. The only thing that didn't go right was the fact that he didn't move to the UK legally, but it didn't really matter because the rules are that he just has to go because it's an illegal migration, which I think is an interesting perspective. Again, you can tell that the track obviously has a pretty specific theme, and I think it's handled in an interesting way. It's not like he's just waffling for ages. He actually has, you know, direct lyrics that reference those things. Some great production pops up across this album too. I really like In the Fire with the great soulful beat and the kind of like Kanye-esque instrumental that comes through, you know, early Kanye I'm talking about here, with those soulful jazzy rap beats that he was doing back in like the College Dropout days. Mos Def as well, that kind of production. Really interesting to hear that kind of thing on a Dave track, and I think, you know, it does go on a bit long again. Some of these tracks are touching high numbers, and it probably could have been cut shorter, but I actually still think, you know, for what it is, it's a pretty solid track. He says that line as well, crime on the rise, hate on the rise, and then, you know, the only thing that isn't on the rise is his mum's pay, or whatever he says. It reminds me a lot of actually how, you know, K Tempest tackles their lyrics in their tracks too. Again, K Tempest, fantastic. Go check out K Tempest. And then there are a few other tracks that string together that go for more of like a dance hall-y type thing. He's got Wizkid on System. Wizkid is actually pretty fun, and he adds a nice little touch to the track. And the track after it as well, Lazarus, is doing a similar thing. It's not as fun as System, I don't think, but it's, you know, pretty solid for what it is. Law of Attraction has Snoh Aalegra on it. Solid hook. I think Snoh Aalegra hasn't been quite as strong as when she was putting out the album Feels. Don't feel like she's hit the mark in the same way, but she adds an okay little chorus on this one here. Dave drops a line here: sometimes banking's our ability, but I'm still learning accountability. Oh, to be fair though, that Pokemon line that he drops where he's talking about how women are like Pokemon, you know, you always see them but you never catch them all. It's like, oh, come on. So many one-liners like that really sour the mood on some of these tracks. Like, he can be insightful, touches on an interesting topic, but some of his drops, like one-lining drops, are just like so bad. Where he says as well at one point on the James Blake feature track, ask James Blake, I ain't see the colour in anything. Oh, another one that's just a bit long, honestly. James Blake's feature's okay. It's similar to Snoh Aalegra, where it's quite faint and doesn't actually add loads to the song, really, I don't think, but they're solid enough what they are, just not really tracks I'd ever go back to. I think Clash could hit a bit harder, considering, you know, it's a Stormzy feature on a Dave song. I thought it would have just kind of banged a bit harder. It's similar to some tracks like AJ Tracey does. I think he's a bit better at hitting those harder hitting bangers, to be honest. But it's okay for what it is. A few other lyrics that pop up that aren't the best. But yeah, like I say, I think that collaboration probably could have been a bit more of a show-stopping thing than it was. And then Survivor's Guilt closes out the album, probably one of the more insightful tracks again, similar to Three Rivers, throwing out a lot of lyrics about his mental health, having anxiety, he can't even drive anymore at one point, he even says. Touching on a lot here, how he wants to be a voice for black women as well at one point that he says on this track. I think he feels a bit of guilt from when he was younger, probably treated women not in the kind of best way he probably should have. But I think, you know, young teenage men do tend to go through those phases of just not really treating their girlfriends the best. Not that there's an excuse for it, but I'm assuming he's coming from that kind of background. That line as well about being a millionaire at a tender age and not knowing what to do with his money was a bit out of touch, I feel. I think sometimes people, when they get so much money, they just completely lose sight of like reality, honestly. I think, you know, it just seemed a bit of an odd thing to throw out there. Like, of all the things you could bring up, why are you asking for sympathy of not knowing what to do with all the money you have. I just found that a bit weird. Does mention his mum on this one as well, wanting to take care of her. She gets brought up a few times on this album. Yeah, like, this album is hard for me to sort of summarize, because there's a lot of good here, and there's some fun tracks that I appreciate a bit more than what I think he was doing on Psychodrama, but there's still a lot of just unnecessary waffle on this one, and trim the fat down, man. This is an hour long. You've got tracks that are hitting like 6, 7, 9 minutes. Just, do we need that? I do think this is slightly better than Psychodrama, to be honest, but I think the overall product is still a bit mixed. Like, when I think of how many tracks I would, definitely go back to, I just could only pick out like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 at the most, which isn't a great ratio, really. And like I say, for every good moment lyrically, there's another one that's just a really poor one-liner that's really corny and a bit stupid. And then there's, some really boring moments, just like I would expect from Dave at this point. He doesn't always engage me. And then there's some really insightful moments, like 3 Rivers. It's a really mixed bag of ideas across its whole thing. I've got to go 5.5 out of 10. I can't quite endorse this with a recommendation. Usually if I'm giving something a 6, I'm saying I like it, but I just don't think I fully do with this one. The ideas are there, there's great moments, but the overall product just has too many like ups and downs for me to really want to play this in full again, because I'd be skipping at least 3, 4, maybe 5 songs if I played this album again. Let me know your thoughts though. Still not fully sold on Dave, but he's getting there. I think there's something that I appreciate a bit more about this one than I did the last one. So let me know your thoughts, that would be great. Do have a good day, subscribe if you haven't already, and goodbye.